What programs are most susceptible to power vacuums when the current head coach leaves between big money folks and the next staff? Now, he put Alabama in parentheses, and that's the answer to me. That's the far and away runaway answer. I guess you could insert Texas here because we've seen Texas, but here's what he's asking. For those of you who are casual observers of college football, but you don't really, either you don't understand the power dynamics or maybe you've never cared enough to research it. It is an integral part of this game. If you really want to understand the fabric of this game, for better or for worse, this is part of it. You know, when you go on campus at Alabama or at Texas or at Southern Cal, wherever, and you see those immaculate facilities, or you just fired a staff not too long ago and you see those big buyout numbers, well, most of the time, friends, it's not the university that is footing the bill for all that. It is private money that's doing that. Now, those private dollars often come from the pockets of what we affectionately refer to as boosters or donors in the normal world. But we have our own terminology and nomenclature in college football, so those are boosters. Now, sometimes the good boosters amongst us will write the check and then they just boop, boop, they dust their hands off and they say, spend it wisely. I'll see you on Saturday. Now, that is called a unicorn booster. There aren't many of those. There are not many folks with 8, 9, 10 figures, digits in their net worth who just kind of give the money away, but there's no string attached to the dollar bills. Most of the time, there are strings attached. Then you enter into the next tier where you have boosters who they do give and they do want something in return, but what they want is pretty innocent. Like if I want to get my family a tour of the stadium, I need someone I should be able to call, or I want to, be given access to private functions. I just want some access. There's no harm in that. That's fine. And you have more than paid for that access. But you and I know it doesn't end there. And so then there are different tiers where some folks are also giving large contributions, but what they want in return is they want some for sure say in what goes on. And that's when you run into problems, because if I, for instance, have built an empire off of producing and distributing plastic cookware, I know everything there is to know about the plastic cookware business. I do not know how to stop the inside trap, which means I have no business having any say-so in who our defensive coordinator is. But since I paid for a part of his salary and I bought out the previous staff, and this building's got my name on it, I just think that I should deserve a say-so anyway. That's how a lot of this goes. And unfortunately, that was the case at a place like Alabama. I talked to someone, this is not exclusive to Alabama, but I'm going to give you an example since Alabama's my answer. I talked to someone one time in the pre-Saban era. Mike Shula was the head coach there. And I talked to someone one time who told me the culture, the booster culture there, was such that some of the higher level donors actually had private meetings with Mike Shula the Friday before games so that they could hear what the game plan was. That's the kind of access that they wanted. They wanted to be not involved necessarily in mapping out the game plan. I'm not suggesting that. I'm sure they let their opinion be heard. But they actually had access to the coach on a Friday before a game. Could you please stop for just a second wherever you are listening, or if you're watching right now, I want you to imagine Abner from Alabaster, or I want you to imagine Trevor from Trussville making their way to Tuscaloosa, Alabama the Friday before Bama plays LSU, and you just hit a buzzer. You're 245 with Nick Saban. He's ready for you now. And Nick Saban sit there listening to these dudes who drove 2 hours to give him their input on the game plan. Like, that's not the way it works. So when Saban got there, he said, it's my way. I'm going to do things the way I see fit. And if you don't like it, leave. That's essentially what he told them. I'm not making that up now. That's not a euphemism. They literally disassociated some people from the program, some of whom had given large amounts of cash to that university. But Nick Saban told them, if I come here, we are not bending on this. And these folks, we want their money, and I can give them reasonable access to the program. I'm not a tyrant, but what I'm not going to have is I'm not going to have it interfering with our process. And he stuck to that. Now, here's the problem. Could be a problem. I'm not going to say definitively it is, but the question was, where is the power vacuum once a head coach leaves? Well, my question about Bama, and the reason I answer that is, or I answer in the affirmative with Alabama, is because I wonder what it'll be like when Saban leaves there. I was doing Next Round Live with Lance Taylor and Jim Dunaway and Ryan Brown and those guys. They asked me this the other day on their show, and I said, I think it largely depends on who follows Nick Saban. Everyone's talking about, oh, who wants to follow in his footsteps? Who wants to try and live up to that legacy? Yeah, I guess that's valid. What I always think about with Bama is, will the next person who sits in the head coach's chair there have the gravitas that it takes to walk into a place as big as Bama and look those folks in the eye? These are folks who believe Alabama football has every bit as much to do with them as it does the head coach and the players. Does that person, does that future head coach have the gravitas? You could fill in another word there if you want to look them in the eye and say, we're going to win with you, but we'll win without you too. You make up your mind how positive an influence you want to be on this program, but you're not going to have that kind of access. It's not the way we're going to do it here. That, much more so than whoever wants to follow Nick Saban's legacy, that will determine how viable a product Bama will have in the post-Saban era. It's a concern I would have there. It's a perma-concern at Texas because all these same factors exist at Texas. It's run some folks out of town. It's been something that's very hard for folks to grasp. Mac Brown, he ingrained himself and ingratiated himself very well to that culture. It was oil and water for some other guys. It was never going to work out. And, the jury's still out on Steve Sarkisian, but those are a couple of programs, Bama and Texas to a lesser degree, that fit that description. Now you know a little bit more about the sometimes seedy underbelly of college athletics. And it's going to shock you. Hey, that exists in basketball too. What do you know?